To date, Toyota has sold over 70 million electrified vehicles, but they've virtually all been hybrids. This bZ4X mid-sized SUV is the brand's first purpose-built EV. Since its engineering draws on over 2 decades of electrified automotive experience, you'd expect it to be a very complete product indeed. You shouldn't be disappointed.
What kind of purpose-built EV might the world's biggest car maker bring us? Well, here's the answer: the bZ4X, Toyota's first all-new battery electric vehicle. Silly name perhaps, but this car has a very serious remit. It's the first in what will be a whole series of bZ or Beyond Zero branded Toyota electric products to be launched globally, 30 of them between now and 2030. The less-than-catchy name references the size of the car, 4 designates the brand's mid-sized models, and the vehicle type, in this case X for crossover SUV. We certainly waited long enough for this contender, given that Toyota's been making electrified vehicles for over a quarter of a century and experimented with a full electric concept version of the RAV4 as long ago as 1997. It was surprising that this bZ4X took so long to arrive. Didn't actually go on sale here until the end of 2022. The launch was delayed by a detaching wheel hub scandal that the brand took months to fix. But the world's biggest car maker could afford to take its time in developing this model, unlike most of its rivals, because the brand had a range of efficient hybrids. It didn't urgently need EVs to meet its European fleet CO2 targets, but like every other car manufacturer, it will certainly need plenty of them soon. Hence the multi-million-pound development of the all-new eTNGA platform needed for this car and for the many other Toyota and Lexus EVs about to follow it. That chassis is also shared with Subaru, who led the development of this Toyota in its twin-motor all-wheel drive form and have therefore been rewarded with the chance to sell a badge-engineered version of that 4x4 model called the Solterra. It's this bZ4X, though, that Toyota hopes you'll become familiar with. The car tasked with paving the way towards achieving a global sales target of 3.5 million EV Toyotas a year by 2030. But it must do that in the face of a class already overstuffed with a whole host of talented rivals. So, how seriously should you take this car if you're seeking a contender in this segment? Well, you'll need the industry's most comprehensive review, the Car and Driving Road Test, to find that out. So, just another mid-sized EV? That would be disappointing given that this is the first all-new electric vehicle from the world's biggest car maker and that Toyota has had the chance to inspect most of its competitors' efforts before signing this one off. The multifunction digital instrument display screen, positioned in place by these grey plastic slats, certainly looks different. It springs to life with a green ready symbol once you push the start button, and the drive selector with its blue illuminated options is unusual too. What's important though is whether Toyota has brought anything new to this segment where it matters: on tarmac. Well, actually it has. OMG, yes. OMG in this instance, standing for the brand's revolutionary one motion grip steer-by-wire system, which we haven't got here because it's not scheduled to be fitted to the bZ4X until later in its production run. That comes with a weird joystick-like aeroplane-style steering yoke, which replaces the usual steering wheel. A more conventional tiller remains in standard variants like this one, but because it must eventually be interchangeable with the yoke, it has to be rather curiously small, a bit like the sort of thing that you get with Peugeot's controversial iCockpit arrangement. With Peugeots, that gives you quite a sporty feel, which works on small, light, compact hatches, but it feels rather at odds with the weighty reality of a 2-ton EV crossover. The ordinary steering setup is one of those continuously variable ones, which responds sharply at lower speeds, but more leisurely at higher ones. Through the corners, there's not a lot of feedback, but response to wheel turns feels satisfyingly precise and direct, even when you're pushing on. It's at this point that cars like this used to lurch about, and quite a few of them still do, but this one stays composed with body roll well managed. It's certainly a sportier feeling than that served up by most class rivals. Not that this will be a priority for most likely customers, but delivering a dynamic spark is important for a brand which ended the last decade by promising us no more boring cars. That's an easy mantra to meet with a GR86 or a Supra, but it's rather more difficult to realise with a car that's weighed down with a battery as heavy as an Asian baby elephant. Here, that battery is a meaty 71.4 kilowatt hours in size, and it sits low down as an integral structural part of the all-new eTNGA, or electronic Toyota New Generation Architecture platform, which will undergird the tidal wave of new EVs that the Japanese brand is planning for us over the next few years. The taut rigidity of this chassis helps explain that cornering prowess that we just mentioned, and it can accommodate either front-driven or all-wheel drive powertrains. Both can be specified with the bZ4X, and both use a clever e-axle design which integrates the transaxle, the electric motor and the inverter into a single unit. So no, the lengthy gestation period for this model really wasn't wasted. The two-wheel drive version gets a front-mounted 150 kilowatt motor developing 201 brake horsepower with 266 newton meters of torque. That allows it to make 62 miles an hour in 7.5 seconds en route to the usual modest EV top speed of 100 mph. To be frank, it's probably all the bZ4X you really need. It would be a pity though to ignore the alternative all-wheel drive version we're trying here, particularly as so much trouble's been taken over it. Not especially by Toyota, but by its development partner Subaru, who were given the task of delivering an SUV with the kind of genuine off-road driving capability that previous EV crossovers of this kind simply haven't offered. In proper Subaru style, the all-wheel drive system here is symmetrical, and it's based around a down-rated 80 kilowatt motor on the front axle with another identically powerful motor at the rear. There's no reason why the same 4x4 setup couldn't also work with the front-driven model's gutsier 150 kilowatt motor at the front, as it does in the Lexus RZ, and as will a likely high-performance future GR-tuned version of this bZ4X. But this standard all-wheel drive version of this Toyota is quite eager enough for most, with 215 brake horsepower of system output and 337 newton meters of torque. Mindful of the need for proper off-road prowess for their version of the all-wheel drive bZ4X, badged as a Solterra, Subaru developed a couple of off-piste drive settings for their design too, offered here with X-Mode branding via the center console button, and delivering a choice of either a snow dirt option or a gnarlier deep snow mud setting. The system includes grip control. It can allow this Toyota to wade through up to 500 mils of water, and it adds a downhill assist control feature to ease you down slippery slopes. Ultimately though, any attempt at even mild off-roading in this car would be severely hampered by the eco-minded Bridgestone tyres and its very modest levels of ground clearance. Like all segment rivals, its real remit remains prioritised for the urban jungle, an environment in which a far more useful mode option is accessed via another console button. This one is for what Toyota calls regeneration boost. Regeneration, or what other brands like to call brake energy harvesting, is one of the calling cards of some other EVs in this segment, who offer steering wheel paddles or center screen options which allow you to arrest the car with selectable degrees of ferocity when you come off the accelerator, varying the amount of energy that can be fed back to replenish that battery. There's little of that here, just the regeneration boost button I just referenced, which when it's activated noticeably slows your off-throttle progress, apparently by up to 0.15 G. You might reasonably think that this car could do with a bit of that sort of accented battery replenishment tech, given that the exemplary driving range mileage standard we hoped that this Toyota might set hasn't really materialised, and it won't in day-to-day use, even if you habitually accept the throttle restrictions of the provided eco driving mode. The 312-mile WLTP rated reading, which applies to the front-driven mid-spec motion version of this car that most will choose, is by no means the worst in the segment. Both comparable rear-driven Teslas, for example, do much worse, but it is easily trounced by equivalent versions of key rivals like the Kia EV6, the Mercedes EQA, the Volkswagen ID4 and the Polestar 2. This twin-motor, all-wheel drive bZ4X model's drive mileage, rated at 286 miles for a motion model, is also some way off the highest dual-motor class standards. To take just one example, a dual-motor Tesla Model 3 would take you a substantial 88 miles further than that between charges. Still, other compensatory attributes are available here, including two that Tesla, for one, could learn from: excellent refinement and ride quality that deals confidently with poor surfaces without the need for the suspension to be expensively embellished with the kind of adaptive damping system which Toyota has chosen not to offer. Even with big 20-inch wheels fitted, you really don't need that kind of setup here. Aided by its long experience with hybrids, the brand has also expertly managed the difficult task of mixing friction and electrical regeneration braking. The pedal works smoothly all the way to a standstill without the jerkiness that you find with many competitors. And no other rival has a more complete portfolio of proactive camera-driven drive assist and safety kit. Only if you plan to tow with your EV might you be disappointed. This one can only tug along up to 750 kilos. That's well short of rivals like the Volkswagen ID4 at 1200 kilos and the Hyundai Ioniq 5 at 1600. That apart though, just about everything else here has been very thoroughly thought out, and even if the end result isn't quite as revolutionary for the segment as we might have hoped, there's plenty of potential here to severely trouble the class leaders once Toyota adds in its new steering system and further perfects its battery tech. Progress beyond zero is going to take the brand to some new places, and on this showing, the journey should be interesting. You sense that Toyota was undecided whether its first proper electric vehicle should look like an EV or an SUV, which is why we've got a design here that blends a bit of both. Hardly altered at all from the concept Toyota first showed us at the Los Angeles Motor Show in 2021, apparently based around the theme of high tech and emotion. Well, at least it's different. And it's certainly different from Toyota's usual SUV contender of this size, the RAV4. Compared to that car, the bZ4X is 90mm longer, 5mm narrower, and it sits 85mm lower. Plus it has shorter overhangs, and most significantly, it boasts a wheelbase that's 160mm longer. The 4.69 meters long silhouette is more angular too, with these pronounced upper door creases on both doors and the lower tick-shaped swage line which flows up into the rear wheel arch. That arch is conventionally black cladded at the back, but just ahead of the electric badge here, the front arch, it extends the cladding into the headlamp unit in an attempt to emphasize the crossover vibe. There are slender front pillars, narrow black roof rails, and the usual large alloys, 18 inches in this case, or 20 inches in size, depending on your chosen trim. The stuff that you can't see is important too, like the full underbody cover and the thicker side window glass to reduce intrusive noise. The frontal appearance is characterised by a new, apparently brand-defining hammerhead shape with BD signature slim LED headlight eyes and an emphasis on the front corners, which is supposed to communicate the car's strong stance. Aerodynamics are key, of course, hence the apertures set deep into the front bumpers to create smooth air curtains, and a slim lower grille with a shutter which adjusts to channel cooling air to the battery and to reduce wind resistance too. At the rear, the design focus is again on emphasising the corners. This split roof spoiler that's standard above base trim is interesting, and its aerodynamic properties are supposed to make unnecessary a rear wiper, so Toyota hasn't fitted one. As usual with manufacturers making this claim on a hatchback model though, starting off on an autumn morning with leaves and water droplets on the tailgate glass is a forgotten scenario. The LED lights stretch right across the width of the car, and that's to reflect the current vogue, and a rear diffuser features lower down. It's pretty revolutionary beneath the skin too, this being the first outing for Toyota's new eTNGA electric vehicle platform, shared with Subaru and used by that competing brand's rival Solterra model. The eTNGA chassis fixed elements are the position of the front and diffused rear motors, the under bonnet layout, the driver's position relative to the front wheels, and the width of the battery unit. The changeable elements, which will allow Toyota to use this platform for EVs in a variety of sizes, include the wheelbase, the number of battery cells, and the front and rear overhangs. Right, time to take a look inside. Well, it's all quite different, isn't it? As you'd hope with a car designed from a clean sheet of paper. Now, whether this is as luxurious a cabin as ought to grace a £50,000 upper mid-sized EV is another question. Now, the brand says it's aimed for the ambience of a living room here. We're not sure we'd like our living room to have this kind of ambience, and we really doubt whether you will either. Now, yes, it is built as flawlessly as Toyotas always are, but there's an appliance-like feel to the fixtures and the fittings here that some competitors avoid, and the somewhat somber vibe isn't helped by the fact that the only upholstery choices you're offered are synthetic leather in black or light grey. A few plusher elements do feature this woven textile mid-fascia panel and the in vogue piano black trimming on the upper centre console and around the door window switches, but given the pricing being asked here, none of it's quite enough, even if you splash out on top level spec. Charismatic furnishing isn't everything, of course, and there's no doubt that this is the most sophisticated front of cabin design that the company has ever offered, and in some ways it's the most unusual. The absence of a glove box is supposed to create an airier feeling, but unfortunately you don't really notice that because you're all hemmed in by this high-set centre console, below which room created by the absence of a transmission tunnel frees up open, lower, shallow storage space that you'll hardly ever use. Given that the electric motor, the power control unit and the EV transmission are all intelligently packaged beneath the bonnet, our preference would have been to locate the climate system packaging there also, enabling the removal of this centre console furniture entirely, and that would have created the opportunity for a lovely flat floor between the front seats. That really would have made the cabin here feel spacious and airy. The other thing you'll notice pretty soon after getting comfortable is the unusual wheel and instrument binnacle arrangement, which sees you staring through the spokes of a smaller than usual steering wheel at a 7-inch digital combi-meter instrument screen, which is supported by these unusual grey slatted struts. This setup works well enough, although we can't see that it offers any particular advantages over a rather more conventional binnacle, and there's the disadvantage here that the screen isn't large enough to bring GPS mapping into your line of vision, nor can it be combined with a head-up display, although its high placement means that you would hardly need that anyway. The reality is that this design was mostly prompted by the need to provide for the weird little joystick-like tiller that will replace this steering wheel in future versions of this car, fitted with Toyota's clever one-motion grip steer-by-wire system. At least the instrument screen's more informative than the little 5.3-inch display you're stuck with on rival EVs from Volkswagen Group brands, with a main dial area that uses a grey power meter and a blue battery charge gauge to frame inner readouts for MPH, drive mode, gear selection, speed sign and drive assist info. Range mileage is given too, but a battery percentage readout is lacking, something that apparently is going to be corrected by an over-the-air update. A top left steering wheel button allows you to move this central dial to the right and free up more left-hand screen space for the selectable data display, which can appear to the left of it. With that, more steering wheel buttons allow you to select between various menus for eco functions, drive assist features, audio settings, drive elements and safety systems. Anything else you'll need to know will of course be found on this central infotainment monitor, which will be of the 12.3-inch Toyota Smart Connect kind we have here, provided you avoid the base pure level of trim, which hardly anyone will want. That base spec level condemns you to a smaller 8-inch multimedia display, and that really does look poverty spec because it has to sit within the same bezel as this bigger screen. This Smart Connect monitor, in contrast, is in size and clarity a vast step forward from anything Toyota's previously offered, although it doesn't seem to have any sort of home screen or split display properties, nor is it exactly over-endowed with informative EV features. Those you do get are found in the vehicle section, and that's one of 6 selectable via this narrow right-hand options menu. The others are nav, audio, phone, web browser and settings. Over-the-air updates, cloud-based navigation and a decently intuitive voice activation system also feature, as does wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto smartphone mirroring systems, which you also get on the smaller screen, albeit with the need for a wired connection. This same Smart Connect screen tech in Toyota's tiny iGo X includes physical buttons for switching between the standard interface and that used with smartphone mirroring, but unfortunately they're lacking here. And on the subject of buttons, you do get them provided for the climate system. Thankfully, ventilation control functionality hasn't been all inhaled by this large monitor. It's operated instead here by smart, hidden until needed touch-sensitive switches on the black panel just below. Enough on screens. What else? Well, the roofline might be lower than a RAV4, but you sit higher up than you would in one of those, perched on top of all those battery cells, which delivers far more of a proper SUV feel than most crossovers in this class provide. That helps with all-round visibility, which is fine unless you find yourself needing rear three-quarter vision, in which case those chunky rear pillars there will force you to make good use of the standard reversing camera. Appallingly, given the price, base trim makes you do without parking sensors of any kind. Some have criticised the ergonomics, complaining that unless you set the steering wheel very low, it partially blocks your view of the instrument screen. We haven't found that to be a problem, but you should test this layout yourself in the showroom to make sure that you're happy with it. This curious gear selector here, that takes a little bit of acclimatization, but the seats are comfortable with plenty of the kind of side bolstering which is so often missing from cars in this segment. Plus, they also come with power adjustment, electric lumbar support and heating too, provided you avoid base trim. And they line up neatly with the steering wheel and with the pedals, which isn't always a given. We mentioned the less than opulent materials vibe earlier. If you've shelled up top money for one of these and ignored the premium brand rival, you won't appreciate the insubstantial door pulls, the cheap grainy plastic moulding around the cup holders, or the way that the grey supporting struts for the instrument screen can flex about, as does the infotainment screen mounting. but there are some things that you'll really like too. For example, the see-through lattice lid on this phone charging compartment here below the gear selector. This enables you to keep an eye on your handset alerts, which might appear while it's being powered up, either from the charging mat or from the USB-A port contained within it. Actually, come to think of it, that might actually be rather distracting. Anyway, that compartment is part of a 20-litre cabin stowage space total. The lion's share of that, of course, is provided by the lower part of this centre console, which we referenced earlier on. A space Toyota says is big enough to take a pair of shoes or a handbag, plus it also has a 12-volt, 120-watt socket, a USB-C port and a pen tray. Further back, between the seats here, there's a large stowage box with a rather cheap-feeling lift-out liner and a sliding top that can be pushed forward over the twin cup holders and the pen tray just ahead. We did mention the lack of a glove box earlier. Well, less unusually, a sunglasses compartment, that's been forgotten too. There are no ticket clips on the sun visors, and the compartmentalized door pockets do look rather small, although it is claimed they can each take 2 large drink bottles. Right, enough on the front of cabin experience, let's take a look in the back. Now earlier we referenced the huge wheelbase increase that this car's eTNGA platform has provided for, but all EVs in this class claim to be spacious in the rear. Let's see how this one actually stacks up. Well, it's certainly spacious in terms of legroom. You'll find this to be vast if you come to this car from a combustion-powered saloon or SUV of this size. Even a 6'2" passenger would comfortably be able to sit behind a front occupant of the same lofty height. And Toyota says that legroom here is comparable to the 900mm figure that you get in a top Lexus LS boardroom level limo. Headroom isn't quite so noteworthy, so particularly lanky folk might have to take advantage of the backrest recline adjustment feature. More significant though is an issue that affects quite a few EVs of this kind, namely that the high floor level necessitated by the bulky lower battery pack means that the underside of your thighs could be better supported, although it's something you'll only notice really keenly on longer trips. As you'd expect with an EV, the centre tunnel is virtually non-existent, making the carriage of a third centre-seated adult fairly straightforward if necessary, although they won't be especially comfortable leaning back on a seat panel incorporating this pull-out armrest, which incorporates a narrow cubby as well as the expected twin cup holders. The seat base can't slide, although that is unusual in this segment. More disappointing is the lack of individual overhead reading lights, nor does Toyota provide for next to a climate zone back here, the sort of thing you'd get for half the price on a humble VW Golf. Still, there are twin central vents with a couple of USB-C ports just above, plus you do get seat back pockets, coat hooks in the grab handles and decently sized compartmentalized door bins. So does that long wheelbase translate into a vast boot capacity? Well, not really. The tailgate is powered, providing you avoid base trim, and once it rises, a 452-litre capacity is revealed, which is class competitive, but it's way behind the 490 litres of the Kia EV6 or the enormous 585-litre capacity of a Skoda Enyaq iV. If you want a perspective on the effect of having to package in all those battery cells, then we'll tell you that an ordinary Toyota RAV4 hybrid offers a 580-litre trunk. At least the space you do get here is very usable, accessed via a low loading lip with deep recesses either side, which explain why the 8 carry-on suitcases, which could fit in here, shade the 7-case total boasted by the apparently larger trunk of the rival EV6. The Enyaq swallows 9, by the way. Here though, there's plenty of space beneath the adjustable height floor for charging leads and also for the retractable tonneau cover, although not for a space-saver spare wheel. As is depressingly usual with EVs, you're stuck here with a fiddly tyre repair kit. There's a dim light on the right and 4 tie-downs feature, although they're all at the front of the load area. That seat back recline function means you have the option of making the backrest a bit more upright when you're cramming suitcases in. 3 82-litre cases would fit if you did that, or if you prefer, a couple of mountain bikes. But on the debit side, there's no ski hatch, nor does the backrest get a convenient 40-20-40 centre split. So if you have rear passengers, long items are going to have to go on the roof. Toyota's forgotten to include cargo sidewall catches too, so you have to stretch to the ones on the seat shoulders if you have to flatten the rear bench. Once you've done that, you'll find the space opened up isn't quite flat, but it should be quite sufficient for the needs of most owners. At the time of this test in early 2023, the asking figures for a bZ4X fitted with the largest available 11 kilowatt onboard charger started from around £46,000, but that only gets you the front-driven base spec pure variant that few will want. The range starts in earnest with mid-range motion trim, priced from around £50,000 in single motor front wheel drive form. Add £2,600 more if you want the twin motor all-wheel drive powertrain. Top vision spec starts from around £52,000 in single motor form, with the same £2,600 increment necessary to get yourself the twin motor all-wheel drive model that we're trying here, and that is priced from just under £55,000. All bZ4X models use the same 71.4 kilowatt hour battery pack, basically the same one that also features in a couple of Lexus EVs, the single motor UX300E, which costs only a fraction more than an equivalent bZ4X, and the dual motor RX450E, which costs around £10,000 more than the equivalent twin motor bZ4X. Since we've started making price comparisons, you'll want to know how this Toyota's value proposition stacks up against its mid-sized crossover segment EV arch rivals. So let's get into that now. That £46,000 to £50,000 price starting point clearly wasn't chosen by accident. It's also the price starting point for single motor versions of a host of segment rivals, and even cheaper class contenders with equivalently sized batteries are pretty close to it too. At the time of filming, the rear-driven Tesla Model 3 and the Skoda Enyaq iV80 cost from around £43,000, with a base spec Kia EV6, a Polestar 2, a Tesla Model Y, or a 77 kilowatt hour Volkswagen ID4, all retailing from around £45,000. Add another £1,000 or so to that amount, and you'll open up access to cars like the 77 kilowatt hour Hyundai Ioniq 5, the single motor Volvo XC40 Recharge Pure Electric, and the 63 kilowatt hour version of Nissan's Ariya. If you have a little more to spend, just under £50,000 gets you a single motor Volvo C40 or an Audi Q4 e-tron, while just over £50,000 gets you a Ford Mustang Mach-E in base standard range form, or a Mercedes EQA 250 Plus. A front-driven Genesis GV60 costs around £54,000, and a BMW iX3 is priced right up at around £64,000. So those are your single motor segment alternatives. If you're considering an outlay that starts from around £53,000 on the kind of twin motor all-wheel drive bZ4X we're trying here, then you'll be interested in 4x4 model segment price comparisons. As we filmed, a base all-wheel drive Volkswagen ID4 was priced from around £48,000. Base twin motor versions of cars like the Tesla Model 3, the Skoda Enyaq iV, the Volvo XC40 Recharge Pure Electric, the Kia EV6, the Hyundai Ioniq 5, the BMW iX1 and the Nissan Ariya started at just over the £50,000 mark. This bZ4X all-wheel drive model's same £53,000 spend would alternatively get you dual motor versions of the Polestar 2, the Mercedes EQA, the Tesla Model Y or the Volvo C40, but you'd need about £56,000 for an Audi Q4 e-tron Quattro, around £58,000 for the cheapest all-wheel drive Genesis GV60, and around £65,000 for the cheapest extended range all-wheel drive version of Ford's Mustang Mach-E. by which point you'll be getting into the kind of price territory occupied by cars like the Jaguar I-Pace, the Mercedes EQC and the BMW iX. If, having considered all that, you conclude it is a bZ4X that you really want, then you're going to need to know exactly how generous Toyota is being with the standard spec here. So we're going to take a look at that now. As we said earlier on, the front-driven only pure grade model, that's the entry point to the lineup, and that has features including 18-inch alloy wheels, keyless entry, a reversing camera, auto LED headlamps, LED tail lamps, power folding mirrors, an alarm and a heat pump that preserves your driving range in cold temperatures. That latter feature is a costly extra on many rivals. There's also an advanced parking assist system, and that will park the car for you and also help to identify a space. Inside with pure spec, there's a 7-inch digital combi meter instrument screen and a dual zone climate control system with a remote operation function, which allows owners to warm up or cool their car ahead of making a journey. You'll also need to accept a much smaller central infotainment monitor with pure spec. It's an 8-inch multimedia screen, but it does include wired Apple CarPlay and Android Auto smartphone mirroring, cloud-based navigation, Bluetooth and a 6-speaker DAB sound system. The mid-range motion spec we have here is the one you're more likely to want, and as we said earlier on, this is the minimum trim level you'll need if you want this car in its twin motor all-wheel drive form. Motion spec gets you a rear spoiler, rear privacy glass, a powered tailgate, auto wipers, a special entry illumination sequence and all-round parking sensors. The rear sensors work with an auto brake intelligent clearance sonar function for vehicles and objects you might otherwise inadvertently maneuver into. The cabin has part synthetic leather upholstery and heated front seats. The driver's chair has 4-way lumbar support and 8-way powered adjustment. Plus there's also an ambient lighting system and a wireless charging tray too. Now, a key gain at this level is the larger 12.3-inch Toyota Smart Connect multimedia display, which comes with a voice assistant and also embedded navigation, and is used for the 360-degree panoramic view monitor. The top vision grade marked the summit of the regular model lineup from launch with a prestige specification which includes 5 double-spoke 20-inch alloy wheels, a kick sensor for the powered tailgate and a digital key feature which allows the vehicle owner to provide access to the vehicle to others by means of a smartphone app. At this level in the range, there is also a remote-controlled parking assist feature. Now this will allow you to amaze your friends by parking the car using the key fob while you're standing outside it. Inside with vision spec, well, you're treated there to synthetic leather seat upholstery, a heated steering wheel and 8-speaker JBL premium sound system, and for the front seats you get memory settings and cooled ventilation. Whatever spec you opt for across the range, as with all new Toyotas, useful connected services can be accessed via the MyT Toyota smartphone app. For the bZ4X, as with the brand's hydrogen fuel cell Mirai model, it allows you to preset the climate system before you reach the car, so the cabin will be perfectly warm or cool at the beginning of your journey. And that includes demisting and the heated steering wheel and the seats. And also you won't have to expend battery energy on excessive fan use. As it does with other Toyotas, the MyT app can also brief you on speed cameras and real-time traffic information. Plus, it can check points of interest along your route, locate parking spaces, and review destinations with Google Street View. Other MyT features include practical and useful information about the brand and an eco-driving app. MyT also logs driving data, so information about mileage, speed and acceleration can be retrieved at a later date. And it can also provide reminders about when the car's service is due. What about options? Well, there aren't many. Avoid base spec and you can order a fixed Skyview panoramic glass roof, and with mid-motion spec you can upgrade to larger 20-inch wheels. All bZ4X models can be ordered with some kind of tow bar, and you'll be able to specify a protection pack with a boot liner, a rear bumper protection apron and all-round mud flaps. Plus you can add rubber carpet mats to that if you wish. You will probably be paying your Toyota dealer more for your choice of paint colour. Solid dark black is the only standard shade. Otherwise it's £645 more for the metallic dark blue finish we have here, or £965 more for a choice of 4 pearlescent shades. On to safety. Now, as you expect, the ETNGA platform gives this car fundamentally very strong standards of crash protection. The rear framework includes a double ring structure and the rear pillar support structure, providing rigidity to help withstand impact forces from multiple directions. And although the integrated front pillar section is 15% thinner than the sort of thing you'd find in other vehicles of comparable weight, it too is engineered to withstand forces from multi-directional impacts. Plus, there are specific measures to protect the battery unit in the event of a front, rear or side impact. In addition, all versions of this car get all the expected passive safety features too. Twin front, side and curtain airbags, plus a front center airbag to stop front seat occupants from injuring each other, and rear side bags too. There's also an e-call system which will automatically alert the emergency services with your exact GPS location if any of the bags ever inflate in an accident. You can also tick off ISOFIX child seat anchors, a tyre pressure warning system and an emergency brake light signal which activates in panic stops. Plus there's hill start assist control and driver attention alert, which constantly monitors your driving reactions for signs of drowsiness. In addition, there are all the usual features for braking, traction and stability control, interlinked by Toyota's Vehicle Dynamics Integrated Management System. Hopefully all of that leaves you feeling a bit more confident about this car's safety status, so we can now go on to detail the camera safety kit fitted across the range. Now there's quite a lot of it thanks to the provision of the Toyota Safety Sense package. This is now branded Toyota Teammate, and it's a portfolio of features which a recent Impact Research USA study found would reduce your chances of a front to rear crash by up to 37%. As you'd expect, an autonomous braking system is one of them. This car's PCS, pre-collision system, is able to detect pedestrians in the vehicle's path in day and nighttime driving and bicycle riders during daylight. The system also provides additional safeguards when you're making a left or a right turn at a road junction. It detects oncoming traffic or pedestrians crossing the road into which the vehicle is turning. Visual and audible alerts are sounded. If the driver doesn't react, then automatic braking will be initiated. The PCS system also has an emergency steering assist function. If it determines that a collision is likely and that there's sufficient room in the vehicle's lane to avoid an impact, it will provide extra steering assistance while maintaining vehicle stability and also preventing lane departure. It will also help guard against the risk of an impact if the driver puts excessive pressure on the accelerator when driving at low speeds. The system will then automatically reduce engine output, or it will lightly apply the brakes to suppress the acceleration. Next up with the Teammate package is Toyota's IACC, Intelligent Adaptive Cruise Control System, which has an all-speed tracking function and will automatically calculate if speed needs to be reduced when you're driving through a bend. Speed suppression will operate from the moment that the steering wheel begins to turn, and it will continue until the angle returns to the straight ahead. The IACC setup works in conjunction with two other Teammate features, LDA, Lane Departure Alert, and LTA, Lane Trace Assist, and they're both there to help keep your bZ4X centered in its traffic lane. If the car deviates from its lane without the turn indicators being used, the LDA/LTA system will sound a warning, display an alert, and trigger steering wheel vibration. Steering assistance will then be applied if required to help to return the vehicle to its correct path. The LTA setup is also able to detect if the driver may have suffered an emergency with an emergency driving stop feature, which determines if there is continuous non-operation of driving functions. For example, if the driver's hands are not on the wheel after a medical emergency. It will issue visual and audible warnings. Then, if there's no response from the driver, it will gently bring the car to a halt and then activate the hazard warning lights and horn to alert other road users. Other welcome teammate safety sense features include RSA, road sign assist, which keeps the driver alert to principal road sign commands and warnings, presenting them as images on the instrument screen. This system can also work with the IACC setup to automatically keep the car within the speed limits enforced in the course of a journey. So if you press the right buttons to activate this feature, you should never get caught by a speeding camera ever again. Well, in theory anyway. There's also a low-speed acceleration suppression system. This is aimed at avoiding unintended heavy use of the throttle when maneuvering. Automatic high beam, that dips your headlights automatically for you at night. That's included too. And there's a proactive driving assist system, which scans the road ahead to calculate collision risks and operates the brakes and the steering at an early stage to help prevent an accident. This can be, for instance, a person or a cyclist close to the edge of the road or about to cross, or perhaps a wayward vehicle ahead. If you want more, you'll need to have avoided base pure spec, and if that's the case, then your bZ4X will also come with a blind spot monitor, which will alert you if you're just about to pull out dangerously in front of another vehicle. The same camera is used for a safe exit assist system, which will warn occupants about to open the doors in the face of oncoming vehicles, pedestrians or cyclists. Now, earlier we also mentioned that motion and vision spec bZ4X models have an intelligent clearance sonar. That's part of a useful PKSB parking support brake system, which tells you if you're just about to hit an object or a vehicle at low speeds, say a low wall or a parked car. If the sonar determines that the risk of collision is extremely high, then the brakes are automatically applied, and that's to help avoid the collision or reduce the impact. It's all very reassuring. What we'd hoped for here in terms of drive efficiency was a real step forward in battery and electrical architecture technology, or at least an EV with an 800-volt electrical system, which would enable it to use the coming generation of ultra-fast public chargers, the sort of thing that's been available for several years from Hyundai Motor Group brands and top lottery-level Porsche and Audi EVs. Disappointingly, Toyota hasn't stretched to that here. There's a conventional 400-volt setup instead, and an 11 kilowatt three-phase onboard charger. The car will accept fast charging at up to 150 kilowatts, which will replenish the 71.4 kilowatt hour usable capacity battery to 80% in 20 minutes from a 150 kilowatt DC charger. It'll be an hour with a 50 kilowatt DC charger. Your garage wall box with a 230 volt, 32 amp, 11 kilowatt supply will take about 9.5 hours for a full charge, and it'd be 12 hours 45 minutes with a 7 kilowatt wall box. So nothing to write home about with those stats, or in terms of the WLTP rated mileage range figures that we touched on in our driving section. We'll give you those in a little bit more detail here. For the single motor front driven model, the range is quoted at 317 miles in base pure trim. That falls to 312 miles with mid-range motion spec, and just 277 miles with the larger 20-inch wheels of top vision spec. Those stats are based around Toyota's claim of a 4.4 miles per kilowatt hour combined energy consumption figure. To give us some class perspective there, that's slightly better than a two-wheel drive Nissan Ariya, a Ford Mustang Mach-E or Genesis GV60, and it's about the level of drive range you'd get from a rear-driven Tesla or Volvo model in this segment. But it's also well short of the kind of 320 to 330 mile range you'd get from a better performing model in this class, like a single motor version of the Polestar 2, the Volkswagen ID4, the Kia EV6 or the Skoda Enyaq iV. The story is similar if you choose an all-wheel drive bZ4X like this one. Such a twin motor version of this car manages 286 miles in this motion spec or 259 with vision trim. With an all-wheel drive bZ4X, those official figures are based around a claimed 4 miles per kilowatt hour combined energy consumption return. We've been getting about 3.4 miles per kilowatt hours consumption on this test, which works out to a 243 mile real world range. Again, some class perspectives needed, as we filmed in segment only dual motor versions of the Genesis GV60, the Nissan Ariya and the Mercedes EQA. They did worse than Toyota's official stats. All the other contenders are either at the 300 mile range point or more likely considerably over it. Dual motor versions of the Polestar 2 and the Tesla Model S managed 368 miles and 374 miles respectively. So Toyota's got a long way to go here to match the prevailing class standard. A few more words on range. Early bZ4X owners and quite a few journalists gave Toyota a lot of flack for feeble real-world range figures that differed wildly from the official ones. It turned out that Toyota had been too conservative with its buffer, the reserve level that the battery retains when the mileage indicator says 0. At the time of this test, the buffer was still set at 8% of battery capacity. Rivals set it much lower, and as we filmed, Toyota was promising that it was about to do the same. There are also positives here though. The brand fits as standard the heat pump that many rivals sell as a pricey extra. This feature is there to preserve battery range in cold weather. And talking of the battery, the one in this car comes with the kind of warranty that rivals simply can't offer. This bZ4X's battery comes with a 10-year warranty, and that guarantees that the unit will maintain at least 70% of its original capacity by the end of a decade of use or after 620,000 miles. That's all subject, as you'd expect, to an annual health check at an official Toyota retailer. Toyota confides that the engineering target here was actually 90% of energy capacity for the decade, and that this has been met. Either way, this is now the kind of battery peace of mind package that rivals have to now aspire to. EV battery longevity is ensured by careful battery management, which can be damaged by continued rapid charging. But in this Toyota's case, should that happen, the system steps down the energy intake to protect the cells. The whole car gets a better warranty package than you'll find with rivals too. Like all Toyotas, this bZ4X is covered by a 3-year, 60,000 mile package, which owners can extend at no cost through the Toyota Relax program, simply by having their vehicles serviced at an authorized Toyota center. You gain an extra year and 10,000 miles of cover, up to a limit of the vehicle reaching 10 years and or 100,000 miles. There's also 3 years of AA roadside assistance, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year in the UK and across 44 European countries too. We were talking earlier about charging. The brand has thought a great deal about that process for owners when they're out and about, giving them access to the Toyota public charging network, and that's one of the world's largest. It includes more than 12,000 charging points. As part of the so-called Kanzen approach, the marque allows customers to sign up to that service, to choose a preferred tariff and use a provided Toyota Mighty app to find available charging stations nearby and to make automatic payments. The status of individual charging points can also be checked using that app. At the time of this test, as part of the purchase price, Toyota was giving bZ4X owners 6 months free access to their public charging network and a British Gas Centrica EV home charger. If that offer has expired by the time you view this film, then try to negotiate it back in. For home battery replenishment, you can of course set your charging schedule in car on the vehicle part of the center screen, a section which additionally provides real-time consumption data. There's also a trip info screen which shows current info as you drive, average speed, range, trip duration, and an ongoing miles per kilowatt hour graph. And there's a history section too that shows your latest miles per kilowatt hour figure, plus your previous best and a historical miles per kilowatt hour graph. What else? Well, you'll need to know about insurance, which, as ever with an EV, is likely to be expensive because brokers remain terrified of heavy accident costs which might follow severe damage to the battery powertrain. The entry-level front-driven pure model that is rated at Group 35, while the Motion and Vision front-driven versions are in Group 36. Both versions of this twin-motor all-wheel drive model sit in Group 38. These ratings are similar to those of close rivals like the Hyundai Ioniq 5 and the Ford Mustang Mach-E. Servicing, that's required every year or 10,000 miles. As for depreciation, well, the predicted bestseller, the front-driven Motion model, is expected to retain 59.1% of its value after 3 years of use, a retained value of £29,225, and that places it second in segment. Like all EVs in its class, this Toyota is rated at 2% for benefit-in-kind taxation. It's fully road tax exempt in the UK for the time being, and it will escape the London congestion charge until at least 2025. Like most of its rivals, Toyota has grand environmental ambitions, aiming by 2050 to reduce CO2 emissions from its vehicles by 90% compared to 2010 levels. By the end of that period, the production centres will see carbon emissions cut to zero, helped by the development of new manufacturing technologies and the adoption of clean and renewable energy sources. That's good to know. Stupid name, very sensible car. The bZ4X is good enough to endorse Toyota's decision to play the long game and take its time in developing a full EV. We had hoped for a more premium cabin ambiance and a more groundbreaking set of drive range stats, but in almost every other respect, this car emerges as a very complete product indeed. The engineering here is certainly complete enough to make quite a few other mid-sized full electric crossover rivals feel a bit first generation. In many ways, this is the EV that Toyota's rivals always feared it would build. We've been surprised at just how engaging this car feels to drive, and few contenders in this class ride better. In addition, the bZ4X also scores in terms of its refinement and long warranty. Plus, Toyota's also clearly, very carefully thought through all the worthy stuff like end-of-life recycling and carbon neutrality over the full production cycle. We're surprised the brand didn't use this design's lengthy gestation period to engineer in the 800-volt electrical infrastructure, which would have opened up access to the coming new generation of ultra-fast public chargers, but we don't doubt that we'll see that with future Toyota EVs. For the time being though, this one is exactly what the world's biggest car maker needs in this segment. Decently arresting to look at, just about competitively priced, and unlike most previous models from this brand, properly provided for in terms of connectivity. In future with Toyota, we will see more extreme electric vehicles than this one, but for the slowly evolving target market, right here, right now, we think that this bZ4X will work just fine.